Imagine coming home. You've spent 10 hours in an office where the fluorescent lights hum with a predatory buzz, your mind a cluttered filing cabinet of deadlines, spreadsheets, and the forced social graces of corporate life. All you want, all you crave, is the sanctuary of your own four walls. But what happens when that sanctuary develops a life of its own? What happens when your home has its own active hours? A secret schedule where things move, breathe, and watch. And what if you realize with a chilling certainty that this secret life only begins the moment you are gone? I realized how pathetically behind the curve I was that Tuesday afternoon. The CCTV camera sat in my palm, a small obsidian eye that felt heavier than it looked. For weeks, I had been playing a primitive game of cat and mouse. Every morning before work, I would set it up in the guest room. Every evening, I would manually retrieve it, scroll through hours of grainy footage, and feel like a tech-illiterate fool. I was a man haunted by a house, yet I was treating the solution like a high school science project. The guest room, the far corner of the hallway, the room we never used, but the room that had begun to dominate our lives. The terror started as a whisper, a random sequence of sounds. Sometimes it was the dry groan of a wardrobe door being eased open. Other times it was the unmistakable friction of a chair being dragged across the floorboards. Screech, thud, screech, thud. Then there were the rhythmic knocks. Duck, duck, duck. Subtle enough to be ignored by a casual guest, but loud enough to send Arsha into a fit of sobbing and wake Arshi in the dead of night, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't yet name. I spent 30 minutes huddled over my laptop in my office, the volume on my speakers turned down to a ghostly murmur as I watched tutorials. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my temple. Why hadn't I done this sooner? The sync finished. A blue light flickered on the camera, then on my phone. Cloud access, live streaming, total surveillance. I leaned back in my swivel chair, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I felt a small, sharp spark of satisfaction. For the first time since the guest room terror began, I felt like I was one step ahead of whatever was intimidating my family. I wasn't just a father hiding under the covers. I was a hunter setting a digital trap. Tock, tock. The sound was sharp, authoritative. I reflexively minimized the CCTV window on my laptop. The door to my office opened, revealing Vika Putri. In the corporate hierarchy, Vika was the iron manager. The junior staff called her Miss Jutek, Miss Grumpy, behind her back. She was a woman of sharp angles, tailored suits, and a gaze that could peel the paint off a wall. "Mr. Radit," she said, her voice a flat, professional monotone. "I heard you were feeling unwell today. You haven't left your office for lunch." I blinked, momentarily disoriented by the shift from paranormal investigation to office politics. "Oh, I've just been caught up in some things, Vika. I'm fine." Without a word, she stepped forward and placed a plastic container of nasi rams, spicy mixed rice, on my desk. The scent of lemongrass and sambal suddenly filled the air, reminding my stomach that it was empty. "This is for you," she said, her tone indifferent. "For me?" I asked, genuinely stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I noticed your desk was empty during the break. It's a waste of company time if you collapse from hypoglycemia," she replied, but her eyes lingered on mine for a second too long. There was a strange, searching quality to her look, as if she were checking for a fever, or perhaps something deeper. "Thank you, Vika, truly." She nodded curtly and vanished, the door clicking shut with clinical precision. I sat there for a moment, the warm rice in front of me. If my friend Hillman saw this, he would have lost his mind. He had been trying to get Vika's attention for 2 years, buying her expensive chocolates and gourmet coffees, only to be met with cold silence. And here she was, hand-delivering me a cafeteria lunch. I ate alone, the office quiet around me. It was strange. Ever since the noises started at home, the world outside seemed to be tilting on its axis. People were different, more attentive. They watched me with a curiosity that felt like pity or perhaps recognition. It was as if I carried the smell of the guest room on my skin. I left work early, the clock barely striking 5. The commute was a grueling crawl through the metal veins of the city, but I didn't mind the traffic. My mind was already at the house. I needed to plant the eye before the sun went down. By 6:15 p.m., I was pulling into the driveway. "Papa!" Arsha shouted, sprinting toward me the moment I crossed the threshold. "Hey, buddy," I said, lifting him up. "Where is everyone? It's too quiet in here." "Lana is feeding Archie. Arca and Uncle Rico are in the den playing PS5, he whispered, his eyes darting toward the hallway. I kissed his forehead and headed upstairs. After a quick shower and prayer, I retrieved the camera from my bag. My footsteps felt heavy as I approached the end of the hall. The air seemed to grow thicker, more viscous, the closer I got to the guest room. It was a dead space, a room meant for visitors who never came. The door was always closed, a white slab of wood that felt like a tombstone. When I turned the handle and stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't cold, not in the way the movies describe it. It was stale. It felt like a room that had been holding its breath for a decade, preserving every exhaled breath of whoever, or whatever, lingered there. I placed the camera on the vanity table, nestled between an old bottle of perfume and a jar of pomade. From this angle, the lens captured the bed, the wardrobe, and the heavy velvet curtains. "If you're here," I whispered to the empty air, "let's see what you really are." I backed out and shut the door. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of Arsha's bed. "Was it loud last night?" I asked softly. Arsha shook his head, his small fingers twisting the edge of his blanket. "When you're home, Papa, it never happens. It's like the noises are afraid of you." I tried to smile, but my heart wasn't in it. There was no pride in being the protector if the danger only waited for my absence. It made me feel like an interloper in my own family's trauma. "So, the ghost is a coward?" I joked. "No," Arsha said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't think it's scared. I think it's just waiting for its turn." That chilled me to the bone, waiting for its turn. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the living room, my laptop open to a half-finished report, but my phone was propped up against a stack of books, the screen glowing with the live feed from the guest room. 10:13 p.m. The room was a study in gray and black. Shadows stretched across the floor like long, skeletal fingers. Nothing moved. 11:01 p.m. Still nothing. The silence of the house was absolute. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to have died down. 11:47 p.m. I felt my eyelids drooping. I was a man chasing shadows. Maybe Arsha was right. Maybe my presence was a repellent. I began to think about the rational explanations, the house settling, the wind in the vents, the overactive imagination of a tired father. 12:03 a.m. I stood up to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. I needed the cold shock of it to stay awake. I walked to the sink, drank deeply, and returned to the sofa. As I sat down, my phone screen flickered. A banner notification slid down from the top. My blood turned to ice. I was in the house. Everyone was accounted for. Arca was asleep. Rico was passed out in the den, and my wife was with the baby. With trembling fingers, I tapped the notification. The live view expanded. At first, the room appeared empty. Then I saw it. The heavy velvet curtains at the far end of the room began to ripple. It wasn't the wind. The windows were locked and bolted. The fabric moved with a slow, deliberate grace, as if someone were standing behind them, tracing the embroidery with a finger. I held my breath, my eyes wide, staring at the small screen. Then the movement stopped. The room returned to its deathly stillness, but something was different. My eyes drifted to the large, ornate mirror on the vanity table, the mirror directly in front of my hidden camera. In the reflection, a figure emerged from the darkness of the corner. It was tall, impossibly still. It stood directly behind the camera's position, staring into the mirror. It didn't breathe. It didn't blink. It simply existed in that space, an intruder in the heart of my home. But it wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a monster with claws or glowing eyes. The figure leaned forward, its face entering the pale moonlight filtering through the curtains. My heart stopped. The phone nearly fell from my hands. The face in the mirror, the face staring back at the camera, was mine. Every line, every tired crease under the eyes, the exact shape of the jawline. It was me. But I was sitting on the sofa in the living room. I looked down at my hands, then back at the screen. The other me in the guest room didn't move. But then, slowly, its lips began to curl. Not into a smile, but into a silent, mocking snarl. It raised a hand, my hand, and pointed directly at the lens. It wasn't looking at the camera. It was looking through the screen. It was looking at me. And then the feed cut to black. Should the story reveal the double's true nature, supernatural, psychological, or a hidden twin, or focus on Radit's terror as the figure begins moving toward the living room?